Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Kingdom Podcast again. This is going to be a wild ride. You might as well get ready and hang on. If you got a seat belt, buckle up. Vem Miller is here with me today. He's the founder of the American Happens Network, AHN. And I want to encourage you to look him up. We're going to have all of his pertinent information in our description down below. But you guys know me. We not only walk around the banks of everything that we're told not to get into, but we dive into it as well. Vem started his career in the music industry, a lot of names that you would know. He's also experienced on governmental corruption. Not that he's been involved in it, but that he has been digging into it, knowing how to expose it. That's kind of the rabbit hole we're going to go down today. Many of you in the church that listen to this, you might get some truth bombs that you have not experienced yet before. That's okay. When you get it, swallow really hard and let it digest, because it'll make you more healthy politically, governmentally, and also to do with the church. So, Vem, my new friend, welcome to the Kingdom Podcast. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's a great pleasure. And like I was saying before we started, I really like your style. I like the bare knuckles men of God. That's what we're really into here. Before
I was born again at 8. Backslid. I was a good backslider. I backslid at my teenage years, came back to the Lord in my early 20s, but I'm used to knuckles and skulls. And I think that's where we need to be in the pulpit. We need some more backbone in the pulpit. We got too many pansies right now who are professional preachers and know nothing about what our real call is. Exactly. And so let's dive into this, man. You were at the RNC. Tell us a little bit about what happened and what went on there that you think is important for the church to know about.
So, firstly, I think this was a historic RNC. You could definitely feel it in there in terms of the individuals that were there, the brotherhood, the sisterhood of what was going on. I mean, I was at parties where literally Don Jr., Eric Trump were like this far away from me. Felt like a warm family atmosphere. It definitely felt like we were part of something iconic and historic. It was just an incredible energy in the air. And I can't talk about it more highly in terms of that moment in history, but also as, the guy that runs the America Happens Network, we're constantly getting information of what is happening on all levels. And I'd be lying if I said things were harmonious. There was definitely a lot of conflicts between the grassroots and the establishment across various states. It was actually a real learning experience because, we keep hearing what's happening in Nevada here, the state where the America Happens Network is incorporated. And it seems to be a lot of the techniques in terms of establishment versus grassroots are not unique to Nevada. I've now realized after the RNC, this was my big learning curve over there, that these same techniques in terms of the warfare between the grassroots and the establishment is across the board happening in every state. In fact, it almost seems as though there's a handbook that they pass out in terms of how to deal with the grassroots. So that was a very enlightening experience. And, with this information, we're going to do good. We're going to do positive things. We're going to do our best to bring up the grassroots, even as we get into hopefully this new Trump presidency.
I think that this is something the church needs to really understand, is that we call some of them rhinos, the establishment of the RNC. One of our vulnerabilities, our shortcomings in the church is we think everybody's nice and that everybody loves everybody and everybody gets along. But there's this underbelly of the RNC that is no different than the DNC. They all have the same goals. They all have the same purpose. They wear different hats, but they're headed on the same trajectory to, in my personal opinion, Vem, to destroy our country. And I think Trump is an answer to a lot of this. Laura Trump being a part of the RNC, getting us back to the grassroots of what we need to be to take our nation back. What was your opinion of the the progress that is being made against the establishment from the grassroots?
I mean, a lot of progress is happening. It's still not easy. We're still seeing a lot of conflicts. And it's funny how, power definitely gets to a lot of people's heads. Like we saw how, for example, when they did this COVID mandates, all of a sudden these stewardesses on airlines turned into like dictators, right?
Yep.
You give a little bit of power, they lose their mind. And the same exact thing has to be said about our side, frankly, because, sometimes these people you say they're deep state, they're establishment, they have other plans. Sometimes it's just ego and power. And I see this across the board, across many different states, the same kind of issue where, individuals that are supposed to be constitutional individuals all of a sudden have this dictator attitude. They think they could bully people around. They think they could bully people around into silence. And this is, we just have to be cognizant because, hey, Trump wins. Some people think that they're going to, just kind of like it's going to be all good. No, that's when the real war starts, frankly.
Yes, that's right.
That's when we have to push President Trump. That's when we have to support President Trump. And sometimes when we don't agree with President Trump, because there's no such thing as a perfect person, he's certainly the iconic individual for this time. Does that mean he's flawless? No. The Reagan made mistakes. It was people think Reagan's one of the best presidents. JFK made mistakes. Another individual that is considered one of the best presidents in American history. So we just have to be vigilant because this damage we're talking about is 150 years in coming. So it's like 150 years of damage is not going to be fixed overnight. I frankly think it can be fixed in four years, but it's not going to be fixed in 4 years because of President Trump. It's going to be fixed in 4 years because all of our efforts. So, President Trump wins January 20, the real work starts.
Yeah. I have an opinion too. I like to think that I can pray and hear the Lord some, but I have a concern that, if we used to say if Biden wins, but it's not Biden anymore, it's Harris, it looks like. Then there's going to be a lot of trouble in our nation, even up to the place of probably some violence. If Trump wins, there's going to be more violence. Is there an awareness of this type of thing in the RNC, or did you hear any scuttlebutt around there about that? I know that there's not a lot in the church. We're trying to bring that awareness to the church to help prepare the church for what's coming, whoever wins. What's the talk around the RNC, or if you heard any, or that you feel that information we need to know about that?
I mean, I think everybody is aware that there is going to be unrest, whoever wins. It is unavoidable at this point because you've had the mainstream media, one of the most evil entities on the planet historically, brainwashing these individuals. And I got to tell you, I have a very unique perspective because I was in the mainstream media for 30 years, since the mid 90s. I mean, I started as a kid living in Los Angeles, first getting into music video directing, but then actually working for the networks. So I'm very well aware that, and this goes back, by the way, we talk about it in the sense of the Trump administration, some of the nasty things that were said about Trump that essentially brainwashed people on the other side to think that committing acts of violence against this, so-called what was advertised as Hitler, they thought they were doing something good. Stealing elections, a good thing if you're dealing with Hitler. That was the brainwashing, right? Now, I go back to George W. Bush, actually, because that's when my awakening happened. The cancel culture era of George W. Bush, right? Barack Obama was horrible, but Barack Obama wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the fraud, lies, and corruptions of the Bush administration. And that's something that we actually have to remember and be very cognizant of, because that was the groundwork to where we are today. And so this violence that's going to happen, there's no way to escape this violence. This eruption is going to happen. We're talking about 20-something years of things like cancel culture, brainwashing. First, they were brainwashing us in the early 2000s to hate all Muslims so we could go to war, so we could essentially do what was good for the military-industrial complex, which is to promote a war. Now we've been, a lot of the public's been brainwashed to think that Trump is Hitler. So there's no way to escape it. This is an unfortunate aspect of the brainwashing that's happened. But how are we? The question becomes, how do we hold this mainstream media accountable? How do we hold these liars, these fraudsters accountable? Just like in the George W. Bush years, those individuals that gave us the Patriot Act, the housing crisis, all these nonsensical wars that destroyed America's riches, they were never held accountable. And so by not holding these individuals accountable, you give the green light for the next person to do horrible things. So we are in the era of accountability. If we hold these individuals accountable, regardless of the violence that's going to happen, lessons will be learned and we'll have 100 years of peace and prosperity. I truly believe. If we don't hold these individuals accountable, if we don't deal with the tough things that are to come, then I think the country's toast, honestly.
Yeah, I do too. And it's going to take more than politicians to do that. I'm sure, as you've said a while ago. What role does the church need to play in this? And I'm not talking about just, across all denominations and those things. There's not going to be a unity in the church in any capacity. That's not going to happen, as much as it's not going to happen in politics, as much as we'd like to think so, because there's so many versions of Jesus out there that it's actually destructive, and the brainwashing is there. But for those that are listening in the church that claim to be Christians and believers, what do you think needs to happen? What do you think we need to hear to bring us on target, or on task rather, to hit the target of getting Trump into office and also getting our nation back again?
Well, the church, I got some controversial things to say about the church.
Bring them, brother, bring them.
Well, first of all, I think this 150 years of fraud and brainwashing, I think, has to start being uncovered, right? So we get into marriages, for example. Let me give you the marriage example. Any marriage through the church is, of course, what is considered a lawful marriage in the eyes of Christ, right?
Right, that's right.
Any marriage with the government involved, and I'm talking about when you sign that marriage certificate, that is bigamy according to the law, because now you've let a third party, the government, into your relationship. That's one of the things I want to inform viewers about, because you don't need a marriage license with the government, involving the government as a third party, because then it becomes 33% you, 33% your wife, and 33% the government. And the amount of chaos that creates via family courts, via government involved, whenever the government's involved, you're talking about chaos and destruction. So
that's right.
Why do we allow the government into our holy marriages, which by definition is bigamy, hence and therefore is against the laws of God?
I agree with you 100%. And I've done marriages without the government involved, and I think it is absolutely more holy than having the government involved. The government wasn't involved in marriages until the last 150 years. Mm-hmm. And it is something I think that's very dangerous. And well, how do you hold them accountable? Well, if you got a good, strong church, you can hold people accountable in marriages. I mean, that's one of the things that I think that we've got to get right. So we're on the same page with that one. What about, now this is something that I struggle with, because I've got family that are preachers and they vote Democrat. And some of my other side of the family does not like that very much. What would you say to people that are in the church or claim to be Christians and are voting Democrat? What would you say to them?
I got to tell you, I think both parties are the wings of the same bird. I think with Donald Trump, we have a very unique situation now. I don't even feel like I'm voting for a Republican president, traditionally speaking. I mean, this is not one of the Bushes and the Romneys and all of that. So it's not so much of a party for me. But the idea of voting Democrat as a churchgoer, as a believer in Christ, I mean, it is the exact opposite. I mean, this is the party of abortions. This is the party that wants to have after-birth abortions, which is, I mean, you and I think abortion's murder. I don't think there's anybody on this planet that's of sound mind that thinks that an after-birth abortion is not murder. So even I think the craziest of the crazy, well, I shouldn't even say that. Some people think it's still okay, but there's a very small percentage of the population that thinks that's okay. I just don't see how you could be a Democrat as a Christian. It doesn't make much sense, because it goes completely counter to our principles. And I got to tell you, as somebody that was raised in Hollywood. I mean, I came up in Hollywood as a producer starting in the mid 90s. And that was a bastion of Democrats. And to be frank with you, I was a Democrat till 2015. And it's what I learned as a believer in Christ, as a follower of Christ, is that you're talking about really godless individuals. I can't tell you how many meetings I would go to in Hollywood where all of a sudden they'd start, making fun of Bible thumpers and, these crazy Christians. I mean, it's a very common thing in the rank of, in the ranks of Hollywood, especially since most people within Hollywood are atheists. A lot of people are atheists. So I just don't see how a Christian could vote Democrat. It doesn't reconcile with who you are. And people out there that are Christians voting Democrat should be very well aware of the words and things they're saying about you. They call you Bible thumpers. They call you stupid. They call you all kinds of names. You're literally voting for the enemy. Not to say that Republicans are that great. I mean, like I said, they're, wings of the same bird. But I do believe with Donald Trump, we have a very unique opportunity that we haven't had, frankly, in 60-something years,
I believe that very, very much. And I wouldn't be surprised to see another party emerge in the very near future around Donald Trump and even some of his family and close colleagues, even like Steve Bannon and some of those guys that are really paying a price for liberty and for the First Amendment. And so, I think you're right. That was the answer I was looking for. That's what I thought you were going to say. And I'm happy to hear your opinion on that, Vem. I saw some things at the the Republican National Committee that went on that gave me a little bit of hope for the next generation. I think we're doing what we do for the next generation, for our kids and our grandkids, because this is where the fight is. We want to get our nation back so they don't have to keep fighting for it and can enjoy freedom. But that was Trump's granddaughter. Wow, she blew me away. She blew me away. What the room, you could kind of see, but you can't feel what's there. When she was up there speaking, what were your thoughts and what was happening in the room at that time?
I don't think there was a dry eye in the room. And I got to say that about Trump's speech as well. I think we're all very emotional because they humanize his person. We've all seen him as human, right? But because of the mainstream media propaganda, they try to take away his humanity. If you looked at President Trump's face while his granddaughter was talking, I mean, there was moments where I think they actually cut away from him because he was in tears. I mean, he looked very emotional, including during his speech. They cut away from him for like 2 minutes. And I'm like, why are they? It was clear that he just doesn't want to see the world, show the world that he cries. But this is who this man is. He's a human. He's a sensitive human. In fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday about how, he went through a Saul to Paul journey, Trump. I truly believe. And I met Trump for the first time in 1998 at a movie premiere. It was, I think, the second Blade movie or the third Blade movie in Manhattan. There was a movie premiere. I went there with a friend of mine. That's the first time I met him. And then I met him 2 more times before he ran for president. And even in those brief meetings, I saw him changing as a person. And I think now he's made his journey complete. I think he's made the transformation to Paul. I think he understands that God was watching his back. And he's a man, he's made mistakes. I've heard about his mistakes. I've lived in New York. I know he did things that you and I wouldn't consider morally upright, but I don't think that's who he is right now. And I think we've seen something really amazing. I think we're actually seeing a miracle before us. And I just pray that he does the work that God put him there to do.
Blows my mind, the thing that he said, that he is only there by the grace of God. Blew my mind. I mean, you would expect somebody to say that, especially, being conservative, but he said it from his heart. You could look in his eyes and tell that he meant that. And I think when he was on that stage in Pennsylvania on his knees I think there was a supernatural event that took place there that there's absolutely no explanation for. I've been in law enforcement for a while. We were trained on how to investigate, how to determine where a bullet came from,
Mhm.
all of those types of things. And even with that just hitting this part of his ear and his head tilted this way, it should have still took the back of his head off.
Yes.
Just the pure force of the bullet going by.
Mhm.
And we're not hearing talk about that type of stuff. The left is trying to even say it was staged, which is appalling to me. But the assassination attempt was a big part of the RNC convention talking about that.
Mhm.
Uh, how do you think and I know there was a fire in there in the room at that time, but when you were there, was there a victim mentality or turning a tragedy into triumph kind of mentality?
No, it was turning tragedy into triumph type of mentality. It was definitely very empowering being there. The thing that blows me away so much, because we touched upon the kids, the new generation, the younger generation. It really blew me away, the amount of different people from different cultures that were there.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the youth that was there, and this conservative movement via the youth, right? There was influencers there that 2 years ago were not fans of Trump, that now 100% they're all in, right? It's amazing what's happening out there. And, if you don't mind me mentioning, part of what we're
sure.
trying to do with the America Happens Network, this is why we recently added a top 5 music video countdown of wholesome music, right? Not the kind of stuff you would have heard on TRL back in the day at MTV with,
Yep.
low frequency music, promiscuity, drug use, that sort of thing. Because there's a culture building here where I think there's a new conservative youth that is inspired by God, inspired by Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I think the tone is changing. And as an artist, one of the things that's most encouraging, because I think of myself first and foremost as an artist, I've been very fortunate that from a very young age, I've been able to make a living in the arts. And
Yeah.
so I've had that fortune of being in the arts, and I remember going through the '90s thinking this was one of the best eras for art when it came to movies, music, and then it seems as though we went through a dark ages. Right? Currently, if you look at the mainstream media, this is a dark ages. This is the
Yeah.
equivalent of the historic dark ages in the middle era. I think it was 1200s, 1300s, before
Yeah.
the Renaissance came.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
The best art that's being created right now is around the freedom movement. That's what I realized. And I realized these kids are inspired by art. Pop culture dominates the minds of children. The real pop culture, the real art is coming from our side now, because frankly, everything that Hollywood is doing right now, it's horrible. It's
It's
horrible in
garbage.
the sense of it's bad art. I'm not even talking about the
Yeah.
propaganda side of it. It's just bad art. Bad art is boring. Bad art is not something that anybody's into. Most people on a visceral level, they don't react positively to bad art, right? That's why ratings are so low. That's why all these networks are failing. That's why movies are doing worse than they've ever done, because it's bad art. The
Yeah.
good art is happening on our side. There's great music coming out. There's great artists that are doing groundbreaking things on the level of what you would have thought historically, like an Andy Warhol would do, only they're on our side now. And I
Come
think
on.
as history writes this chapter, we're going to realize that the most creative work was coming from us, because art comes from the inspiration of God. And if you don't have inspiration, you can't produce good art. And that on its
Yeah.
own dictates where the Renaissance is happening. And I do
Yes.
that energy is going to lead us to a renaissance. We're going to be looking at an American Renaissance, but without all the nonsense, the low frequency stuff, the sexualization, the promiscuity, all things that have led to nothing but catastrophe in our culture. So I'm very hopeful. I think we got a lot of brilliant young minds and a lot of good music and art happening by these individuals, including people, by the way, like James O'Keefe. People
Yeah.
look at James O'Keefe as an artist. I mean, James O'Keefe is a performance artist on the level of the greatest that have ever existed. If you
Wow.
look at it and dissect what he's doing,
That's amazing. I have hope for the next generation. And I'm glad to hear you say that there were a lot of young people at the RNC and that we're seeing them in this movement. It was hard to tell from camera angles and that type of thing. I don't subscribe to cable television any longer. I just try to get an app, but the only thing I could get on my TV was Fox, which I do not like. Matter of fact, if you've got an app for your television network, I'll get that one, and we'll help promote that. And I think people need to know about American Happens Network and get a hold of that and find that wholesome entertainment that needs to be there. But what do you see the young people? What's pulling them out of the Democrat Party? Even people of color, what is pulling them out of the Democrat Party and giving us some hope for the next generation?
Well, we got to dissect that one, because people that of color, like Black people, different to, I'll tell you this: the Democrats' ignorance is what causing the Black people. Like they claim they're the party of the Black people. Well, frankly, they are ignorant to Black people, because there's two critical mistakes they made. I'm talking about Black culture. A lot of it is through hip hop culture. That's where we hear the voice. And I don't want to stereotype, because that's actually one of the issues of Black culture, is that, they try to, mainstream media makes it try to be like, oh, it's this, it's like basketball, it's hip hop music, it's that, none of that. But where they really screwed up is that the mugshot of Donald Trump. They didn't realize the power of that, because you're talking about,
that's right.
You're talking about a community, and I knew this because I directed some of the biggest hip hop videos of the early 2000s, and I was very deep in that community. So this is a community that has had, frankly, injustice happen to them by what we're seeing, a two-tiered legal system. That two-tiered legal system has been around really for a real long time. Yeah. It just became very mainstream because of what they were doing to Donald Trump. Okay, now big mistake, by the way, because now all those Black individuals that taught, the mainstream media is telling me that Donald Trump is Hitler, we're like, wait a minute, this guy's being persecuted just like my uncle Tyrone right here. And wait a minute, they got a mugshot of him. Wait a minute, they shot the guy. All of a sudden, they lost the Black community. Nobody understands the significance. They will in November, just like Lyndon Johnson, very crude, evil man, said after the Great Society said those N-words are going to be voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Well, he was wrong, because really it was only like 50, 60 something years. Donald Trump just reversed that. And it wasn't Donald Trump, though. It was the ignorance of the Democrats who lied to us, and they say we are the party of Black people. Well, apparently none of you guys have listened to a hip hop album in the last 40 years, because you certainly wouldn't have got a mugshot of that white boy. I hate to say it. that's what it comes down to, yeah. And then shooting the white boy, running the white boy through court that they've seen happen to their community and persecuted. Guess what? And there's a great meme going around, by the way, about that of, Barack Obama was the first Black president, and they used something else to refer to Donald Trump as the first.
I saw that
N-word president, but with an A, how they do in hip hop music. By the way, made by a Black guy. So that tells you a lot about the critical mistakes they made. They literally, give them enough rope and let them hang themselves. Well, they just did, by the way, the Democrat Party.
That's absolutely true. They shoot themselves in the foot, and they can't get out of their own way. Mm-hmm. I think this nomination of Kamala Harris, if she gets to be the nominee, that's still up for debate till they have their convention, but is another stupid thing that they've done. And they have no way out of it.
They cornered themselves. So it's like they give it to her. We all know her incredible speech capability. She's going to hang herself, right? Just by talking, So they're kind of screwed if they do it that way. Now, if they bring Hillary or somebody else, now wait a minute, they're racist because they just took out the Black lead. So it's like there's no way for them to win this other than cheat, by the way, which is something that we need to be very cognizant about.
Yeah.
And one of the things I would encourage in that regard, because we've done a lot of episodes on the America Happens Network on this topic, day of voting is the only way to ensure that they're not going to use your vote to cheat. Close to day of, if you're going to do mail-in ballot, the closer you are to the day of, the less time you're giving them to use your ballot.
Yeah.
People need to be very well aware of this. If you guys are sending your mail-in ballot right now, or weeks before the election, big mistake. Trust me on this. We've done intensive interviews with election fraud experts. Day of voting is the only way to ensure that they don't steal this election for real.
One of the things that we're telling people is that when you get that ballot sent to you in the mail, don't fill it out. Go to early voting. And if you get there and if you can't go the day of, which is, like you said, that's the premier way to do it. But if you take that ballot with you to the early voting and say, I want a ballot to vote. I don't want to use this one. I want one here to vote with today. We've had some people say, well, you voted already. No, we've not voted. I've got my mail-in ballot right here. And you can't say I voted because I've got the proof of what you sent me. And so we're encouraging people to do that if they can, but vote as close to the day of election as possible. My wife ran for state house in Hawaii twice. We know she won twice. And the Office of Election told us to hire a lawyer, if we wanted it. And of course, we knew what that meant. They already had their winner picked out. It wasn't 3 minutes after the poll closed that they announced the winner in my wife's race. 3 minutes after the poll. There's no way in the world to count that many ballots. And in the last election she ran in 2014, there were more people voted in the election than live in her district. Blows me away. The corruption is astronomical.
I mean, the thing that's so ridiculous is we know it's impossible to have more people voting than people that exist. Yet this is something that they've been able to get away with. I mean, it's here we get into treason. And
That's right.
I'm all about using the law to do what's right. Definitely not into violence, but there's a lot of people that deserve treason charges, and I hope it's coming. Because unless these people have a comeuppance, then again, rinse and repeat. It's going to keep happening over and over again.
There has to be accountability, and there has to be accountability at the highest extent of the law for those that are guilty of it. Give them a trial by their peers, put them through it, present the evidence, and then execute. You've got to do that.
Let me give you a quick example. I was born and raised here, but my parents are, of Armenian descent. They actually were in the Middle East because they escaped a genocide. I'm talking about my grandparents. So my parents lived in the Middle East before moving to the West, and there was a thing that my dad used to tell me that, let's say there was somebody in the neighborhood that was convicted, raped a child or something, right? There would be a neighborhood justice. I don't want to get into too much details about what that looks like, but let me tell you what would happen after there was an uprising of neighborhood justice. There would be no more rapes of children. You know what I mean? So I'm definitely not encouraging vigilante justice and that sort of thing, but there's something to be said about people being held to account for the crimes they commit, but really being held to account, not these kind of slaps on the wrist. It sets an example, and people do not do the same crimes once they realize what's in store for them.
That's right. That's exactly right. We have a friend that is in a legal capacity with the Trump campaign. And they told us, they said, because we pray with them a good bit, they said, Greg, if we dot every I and cross every T in this 2024 election, we still lose without a miracle. Now, I think what God did when Trump was shot was a sign that God is working. And I think that we still got to pray. We still got to, seek God's help in this particular capacity. But as we say in Tennessee, there's a time to pray and time to put feet to your prayers. Go vote. Get out there and go vote. No matter how you feel, no matter what your opinions are, no matter how hopeless you may seem, go pull that lever on the ballot box. We've got to do that. I think that this is going to be such an overwhelming win for Trump. In the last election that he won, they didn't cheat enough. That's why they didn't win. They didn't cheat enough. It wasn't that they didn't cheat. They didn't cheat enough. And whoever believes that Biden got 80 million plus votes is absolutely lost their minds. And so we've got to get out there and do it and vote and tell people to vote. Take people, give them a ride to the voting precinct if you have to do that. But we got to do everything to get everybody we know into the voting booth as close to the day of election as possible. There's one other thing here that I think is very important, Vim, that you touched on a little bit a while ago, is the black vote. There's a problem that I see because I'm in the church world a lot. I'm in the black church world a lot. I preach in a lot of African-American churches, and it is still not registered there yet as far as the moving away from the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party is still alive and well in the black church. In the black secular community, I don't think it is, like you said. They're coming alive and understanding these things. What would you say to the black church? Because they're not in this movement very much as of right now. They vote Democrat still for a large part. I'd say at least 60%. What would you say to them that will be watching this broadcast make the move?
I would say research Lyndon Baines Johnson, how he said that you N-words are going to be voting Democrat for 200 years because of financial incentives given to your communities to get rid of the father. Look at the carnage that caused in those communities. Look at what the removal of the father has caused in those communities. These are not your friends. Democrats are not your friends. They are there to essentially, there's an exchange happening there where money's being given, and that is a temporary fix. It's definitely not a long-term fix, because if there was a long-term fix, there wouldn't be dozens of murders every weekend in Chicago because of the primary issue of fatherlessness within your community. Okay. Now then follow what happened in the 60s with Lyndon Baines Johnson to what happened in the 90s with the privatized prisons, also by Democrats, by the way. At the same time, while the Democrats were in power, if you notice, the music went from positive and uplifting, and I'm referring to De La Soul, Public Enemy, people, artists that were really talking about the betterment of the black community, to all of a sudden privatized prisons come out, and then gangster music starts. And guess what? The kids that are listening to gangster music that don't have fathers in their homes then partake in gangster culture. And then you have another generation of black men, by the way, which is consecutive. They started in the 60s with the destruction of the black father. Then you have the 70s, which frankly, the FBI attacked the black community through something called COINTELPRO, which was also used on the J6 individuals, by the way. Yep. So there's a lot of parallels there about government attacking people in all these communities. And then in the 80s, crack cocaine appeared in those neighborhoods. And then the privatized prisons appeared in the 90s, which is very convenient if you want to literally usher in a generation of black men into jail, which is exactly what happened. If you look at those policies that came from the Democrats. So I think we need to wake up and realize that the Democrats have been destroying your community for financial gain and votes for a very long time. And really, when you're voting for Democrats, you are voting for the continuation of those policies that have destroyed your communities thus far. Take it from somebody that didn't know much about these ideas until I started directing hip hop videos, met a lot of people within the community, and realized what was really going on. And that's it. That I urge them to really think about voting choices and how their voting choices have been so destructive to that particular community.
I heard a hip hop artist in an interview not too long ago that said that they got paid more and they were promoted more if they use songs of violence against cops, against each other, because the privatized prison system was owned by many people that were in the music industry. And they used the music industry to get crimes committed so that they could have more African-American men go to jail. To be able to, it's all about the dollar. It's all about the money. And is that something that you've heard before?
I mean, it's something that I've seen. People talk about the brainwashing that led to a lot of the country thinking that Donald Trump is Hitler and all this stuff and these weird ideas. Now, that brainwashing is in music as well. I saw it in music. There's a definite parallel. You just got to build a chart of the music's tone changing, and then all of a sudden a generation of black men being ushered into jail. So
yeah, it's amazing.
That's all there. The change in music's there. The people that were doing gangster rap as opposed to something that's uplifting were getting paid more. Yes, they could make more money, but you know what? I'm sorry, that's prostitution. You're getting paid to destroy your own neighborhood. Why is it that Jay-Z, think about this, why is it that Jay-Z was a drug dealer? He was poisoning his own neighborhood. Why is it that these individuals are all of a sudden the richest hip hop artists, right? Why? Why is it that it's all the gangster rappers that are rewarded for the destruction that they commit? Once you actually follow the money, following the money is a big thing. You realize that you are literally voting for your own destruction. And not to say that voting Republican is so great, because there's been a lot of Republican. I'm talking about this particular individual. Donald Trump is not like your regular Republican.
That's right.
Historically, he's not like your regular politician. And he's certainly not going to do the nasty things that the CIA, for example, did, or clandestine operators from the CIA did in the early 80s, when all of a sudden these neighborhoods in Watts that had green lawns in the 70s, that had strong family structures in the 70s, that had no gun culture, all of a sudden 81, cracking guns all of a sudden appears. I mean, this is literal. By the way, if you guys watch America Happens, our first episode of the America Happens documentary series, which was shot in 2005, that's a topic that it's about. It's about how overnight in the early 80s, all of a sudden guns and crack cocaine appeared in the black neighborhoods. And if you follow what happened there's a gentleman by the name of Gary Webb who was suicided. They say he committed suicide by shooting himself twice in the head. He was suicided, who exposed that the drugs that were being sold in those black neighborhoods in the early 80s were then being used to fund foreign wars by the CIA. And if anybody that knows about the Iran-Contra affair will find out about those facts. And if you want to watch a 5-minute episode that explains it, our America Happens documentary series first episode delves into that particular topic about how your black neighborhoods were destroyed for financial gain by politicians.
Wickedness to the highest level.
By the way, which black politician talks about this? Maxine Waters was actually at a hearing in 1998 with the head of the CIA, and she was asking those questions, but then Maxine Waters becomes rich. January 6th would have been a perfect opportunity for her to say, wait a minute, this is the sort of thing, I'm noticing a little bit of COINTELPRO here, right? This is the sort of thing that destroyed our black community in the 60s, 70s, 80s, right? Same techniques. Why don't we join together? But then they want to make it about black, white, and then she's living in a $6 million mansion or whatever, tells you exactly what's going on there. So if you think those individuals like the Maxine Waters, who are very well aware that crack cocaine was put in the black neighborhoods in the 1980s, you know why I know? Because she was at a hearing with the CIA, which I was there too, by the way, in the late 90s. She doesn't bring that up anymore because now she's rich. She's living in her palatial mansion. And really, these politicians, once they get rich, it's not a black-white thing. The color doesn't exist in the elite. Now you're part of that 1%. And, that's what Maxine Waters is, and that's what a lot of other individuals in the Democrat Party are, because this would have been a great time for unity, and instead they use it for divisiveness to make it about black-white, and it has nothing to do with black-white. It has to do with an elite that takes advantage of us, we the people.
It might, once the larger population figures these things out, it might not even be safe for those types of people to walk down the street. It's the corruption that they've enacted upon the people, and the wickedness and the evil and even the prostitution of our culture is one of the darkest things I think that we've ever seen in our nation in the last 50, 60 years. If you got time, do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
What is your reaction, or do you have any insight on the VP choice that Trump made?
I've always been a big fan of General Flynn, to be honest with you. J.D. Vance, I didn't know much about, but I'm friends with a few politicians who I respect. One of those individuals is Jim Marchand, who the reason I like Jim Marchand so much is the day after election 2020, he actually set up a hotel suite where he started investigating election fraud out of his own pocket, his own time and dime, right? And he said that he thinks J.D. Vance is a fine choice. I still haven't done I haven't done significant research on the topic. I'm taking his word on it. Leading up to it, I was definitely much more of a General Flynn fan, even though I realized that the mainstream media has gone after him so much. But it was very hard for me to watch that Flynn movie, see what they did to his family, and for me not to think that, with what he's been through, with what they put him through, he would be the perfect. It's almost like his wrath is great or greater than Trump. And thinking about what they might do to President Trump, I thought, we need a VP that's going to continue his agenda, regardless of what happens to him. So that was my initial, thing of having General Flynn in there. But it seems as though J.D. Vance might be a fine choice, although I'm hesitant to say that from myself. It's according to individuals that I respect.
I'm on the same page. I'm a big General Flynn fan.
Mm-hmm.
We got to go view the movie when he was in the Nashville area, and I got to interview him for this podcast as well, and just really like him a whole lot. And I hope that he gets put back into government in some capacity, that he can clean house and really help a lot.
He's a good man, and you could tell from the people around him. Mike Flynn Jr. is just a great guy. They put him through hell. That was actually one of the most difficult parts of that movie, was seeing what they did to his son. Really, honestly, I don't know if I've cried that much since I was 12 or something. It was very difficult to watch, and you could tell from the people around him versus again, some of these individuals that are truly deceptive and demonic. They tend to surround themselves with also deceptive and demonic people. And what you see, General Flynn, he's got Ivan Raiklin, he's got Boone Cutler, he's got Mike Flynn Jr. around him, Bianca Gracia. I mean, all these individuals that I highly respect and admire, and honestly that have been such a great inspiration to me to just be part of this fight, really.
Yeah, me too. We've had Ivan on as well. Well, I tell you what, he's a fireball and doesn't care very much at all. I like it, man.
Best time I ever had is rolling around with Ivan. I mean, we just did it at the RNC again, filmed some stuff, which is actually on my Twitter, not Vem Miller. Also, America Happens one on our Twitter. But yeah, rolling around with Ivan, and it's funny because the mainstream media approaches us thinking that they're going to harass us, but watching them flip those tables and play reverse psychology on them it's just like, dude walks up there, they're playing checkers, and Ivan's like the master chess master, So
amazing. Vem, tell us how all the ways that we can get in touch with you to view the American Happens Now network. And all of your social stuff, websites and everything. I want to encourage everybody, you need to go follow and engage with Vem Miller.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So it's our website's America Happens, plural, americahappens.com. You could also find us on our Rumble channel by simply searching under channels for America Happens. We are also on Twitter under not Vem Miller with an M. That's VEMMILLER. Also America Happens 1 on Twitter. You should also check out my partner's Twitter, Mindy Robinson. She's an amazing documentary filmmaker at iHeart Mindy. I know I just gave you guys a lot of social media. The main account is americahappens.com, through which you can get to all of our socials. And we are also going to be on Smart TV. We're actually onboarding all of our episodes right now. We have over 700 episodes.
Come on.
That are all being onboarded right now, which, by the way, we have 14 different shows that we do on the America Happens Network. And we will be on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire by looking like August 1st, give or take. Depends on how long it takes us to upload all these videos. But yeah, check us out.
Nice. We're moving everything to Rumble.
Awesome.
We got demonetized on YouTube, so we're moving it all over there. Hey man, I want to thank you, Vem, for being on here with us. I'd love to do another conversation with you in the future sometime. It's been amazing, absolutely amazing, informative, and I really appreciate you being on here with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. And, love talking to patriots, like-minded patriots. So thank you so much.
Yes, sir. And if we can ever serve your vision and what you feel like God's called you to do in life, let us know, man. That's part of the joy that we get, is helping people become and fulfill who God's called them to be.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.